Giant Brian, the most festive criminal this side of the North Pole. Sentenced to 100 years for stealing his way into the hearts of the general population and then selling the organs on the black market, Brian was now at the mercy of the worst punishment he had ever faced. He was going to miss Christmas! But Christmas was his favourite time of year, for one reason, and one reason only: the Grinch. Ever since he was just a young pickpocket, Brian had admired the Grinch. There was one problem though. The Grinch had stolen Christmas, and in doing so, had pipped Brian to the title of world's greatest thief. Brian had literally stolen a whole UFO at one point, and yet somehow the Grinch always overshadowed him. Well, Brian had had enough, and this year he would prove it. Prove that he could steal Christmas too. The main issue being he was currently trapped in a freezing cold cell somewhere in the north of Finland. Let's see, today was the 23rd of December, that gave him 2 days to escape! Hold on, 2 days? That was plenty of time for a seasoned veteran such as Brian. And, in a flash, he whizzed into action. He began by raiding his fellow inmates' desks, searching for anything useful he could find. He raided Penfold's desk, and then the number taker's desk. He even raided Christmas legend Mariah Scary's desk. And speaking of raiding, I know a game about raiding. Yes, it's finally happened, everyone. Oh my god. I am of course talking about everyone's favourite free, casual and competitive fantasy role-playing game. Equipped with PC-level graphics and a veritable smorgasbord of wonderful and wacky and zany characters to enjoy. Christmas has well and truly come early, folks and blokes, because Raid has launched its Christmas story event with a feast full of mini-games and chances to win both in-game and real-life prizes when you head to raidxmas.plarium.com. And the festive fun times don't stop there. They've also added a bunch of seasonal characters to the game, such as the attack champion Ganishak Vermin Lord, who isn't just here to get rid of your rat infestation, but is a bomb debuff specialist. Useful in a pinch, one would assume. Then there's Pix Neil, which I would have ditched the Pix and just called her Neil because I think it would have been funnier, but she is a very majestic high elf, only instead of making toys in Santa's workshop this winter, she'll be filling up her turn meter by 25% every time a member of her team is frozen. And then there is, of course, the granddaddy of Christmas, my favourite champion, Saint Nicholas himself, who, when he isn't tending to Rudolph and the other reindeers, can be used in unkillable team compositions against the Demon Lord clan boss, as I'm sure we're all already aware. Now, here comes the truly scrumptious part. By using my link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen, you'll get not one, but 2 epic champions, Lightsworn and Juliana. And if you want to be a member of the biggest and baddest clan around, then you can join my clan by finding me under the name Official BogBoy and joining the clan The Bogladites. Visit the link in the description, and thanks very much to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Now he had all the items he needed, it was time to get down to business. First he took a tissue, bless you, and coloured it in orange to make a fake carrot. Then he combined some mince with a tin to make a mince pie. Now, Brian may not have cooked the mince or used any pastry, but he was hoping this would be good enough bait to reel in his target. You see, Brian was going to do some fishing, but not the usual kind he often performed on his Tinder profile. No, tonight he was hoping for a much bigger catch. The final step of his preparation was to find an envelope, for which he would have to infiltrate the mail sorting room. As fortune would have it though, the mail sorting job was already occupied by an inmate named Krampus. So Brian found him, and then proceeded to beat him into a pulp until he was fired, afterwards applying for the job himself. And, after flicking his way through the mail sorting machine, the envelope was in hand. Now he could forge his own Christmas letter. That's right, Brian was aiming to fool the man at the very top. The big cheese himself, Father Christmas. That night, he snuck around the prison searching for the most Christmassy room he could find. The warden's office. Presents in the corner, tinsel on the walls, good fireplace access. It was perfect. He placed all of the sweet treats he had made on the dinner table, and then hid himself away and waited until... Ho ho ho! There he was, the grandpappy of Christmas himself. Brian got the jump on him, and after a quick switcheroo, was pleasantly surprised to find that he and Father Christmas looked almost identical. Perhaps Brian had a future starring in Hallmark movies, but for now, the most important thing was that Santa's reindeers wouldn't be able to tell the difference, as Brian hauled himself into his rather unorthodox getaway vehicle, and they floated upwards into the wintry night sky. Unfortunately though, Brian didn't know how to drive a sleigh pulled by magical flying reindeer. "How do you make them go?" he shouted as they stood stationary in the air. This really wasn't working. He had concussed Father Christmas for nothing, and as the next day rolled round, with only about 12 hours to go until he was supposed to meet his friend Anne Gunn for mulled wine in his neighbourhood Tesco Metro, he was forced to have a major rethink. If he was going to escape, he needed something faster and simpler. As it so happened, Brian did have an idea where he might find just that. First, however, he needed to blow this ice-cold popsicle stand, so he set about exploring the premises, hoping a new plan might present itself. In no time at all, it did. He was standing in some sort of theatre, and in the centre of the stage was a mysterious trap door. You don't install a trap door if it doesn't go anywhere, thought Brian. He had played enough Minecraft in his time to know that. All he needed was some way to access this trapdoor without seeming suspicious. That was it! He would host his own nativity! Giddy with excitement, at once Brian began to make costumes. He made a pantomime horse's front, and then a pantomime horse's back, and oh, he had wasted all of his materials already. Besides, it just dawned on him the nativity had a donkey, not a horse. Oh well, close enough. And Brian himself was such a versatile actor, he didn't really need costumes. He would play the star, the angels, Joseph, Mary, all three wise men, and King Herod all by himself. So all he really required was someone to play both the horse and maybe baby Jesus if he could get out of the pantomime outfit quick enough. Who to pick then? Who to pick? None of the inmates in this prison really seems the dramatic types, but oh no. No, not again. Brian was, not for the first time, faced with the proposition of teaming up with Don Krieg. Brian and Don had been in many different prisons together. In fact, wherever Brian was incarcerated, Don seemed to follow. Thankfully this time, he had something actually useful to contribute. Don had written his own script. Upon reading through it though, Brian found Don had replaced the part of the baby Jesus with a new Holy Spirit named Don Christmas, and fearing that this might get them both cancelled, they opted to steal a pre-written nativity script from the prison staff room instead. Using a fake keycard that Brian had crafted after accidentally knocking out Officer Tickle in the hallway the previous day, they got the script, and finally, it was time for the big performance. The show went down a real hit. Don's half-horse, half-donkey impersonation was so uncanny, the audience demanded an encore. However, as the curtains rolled back for the final time, they were gone. The two of them had heaved open the trapdoor, leapt inside, and scurried away before anyone could stop them. Lo and behold, Brian's escapist senses were right. The trapdoor did lead straight out of the prison, and he and Don covered their tracks, then parting ways, wishing each other a Merry Christmas as they went. It was sad to see Don go, but it warmed Brian's heart to know that he would probably bump into him at some point in the not too distant future. And there was no need to be too down, because in fact, Brian was now heading to arguably the merriest place of all, right on the doorstep of the North Pole. It was Father Christmas's workshop. With all the toys and gizmos and gadgets being shipped to and from here at all times, Brian was hoping to find at least one FedEx van or maybe a Royal Mail truck driven by elves that he could hitch a ride out of Finland in. What he didn't expect to find, however, was a sinister factory full of evil AI robots guarded by yet more prison officers. What sort of a horrific operation was this? Brian had heard the allegations about workers' rights and poor warehouse conditions, but this was far worse than he could ever have imagined. All of Santa's elves had been replaced, and they were now sanctioned in a prison of their own to prevent them from speaking out. Oh, what a terrible life it must be to be a Christmas elf, but hold on, that was no mystical festive fairy. It couldn't be Brian's arch nemesis, Officer. As it turned out, Officer was so small and little and tiny that when being sentenced for all the atrocities she had committed a few months ago, she was mistaken for a goblin. Hence, she had wound up here. Anyway, who cared? To hell with her. Brian wasn't about to help his nemesis. He was focused on his own plan. A plan which now involved whatever that thing was in that room. It appeared to be some sort of rocket-powered sleigh. As long as there were no reindeers involved, it would do just fine. And so, with the aim of overriding the mechanical sleigh's controls, Brian quickly whipped himself up a pickaxe, then diggying his way through the wall to the prison server room, where, after crawling through a ventilation shaft, he found an AI module. This was also second nature to Brian at this point, that he was practically a prison speedrunner. All that remained was to acquire the code for this jet-powered toboggan, which unfortunately was behind a keycard-controlled door, one which he required assistance to get past. Oh, he wasn't gonna have to... He couldn't team up with... Oh, what the heck. It was Christmas after all. And so, after fetching her a toilet roll to deal with what she called an ailment so bad the doctors didn't give it a name, Officer begrudgingly agreed to help Brian out. This was a tag team neither of them had ever imagined, but it was one that worked surprisingly well. And, in no time, Brian pocketed a rather dodgy, untitled USB stick, and the two of them were about to commandeer the greatest Christmas gift of all. These pointy-hatted guards could chase and chase all they wanted, but the world's two baddest bad guys had just called a festive truce. Brian powered up the turbines, the mechanical sleigh roared into life, and they careered out into the blustery white tundra, returning home just in time for Christmas Day. And so, when you wake up on this Christmas morn and you go to check your stocking, don't be surprised if the Freddo frogs you've been asking for all year round have mysteriously disappeared.
Ho, 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 ho.
Thank you once again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Visit the link in the description for all kinds of Christmassy prizes.